Stugotz here. Whether you're into podcasts about ghastly crimes or hip-hop rhymes, there's always something new to discover on Spotify. With a mix of originals and many of the world's most popular shows, listening to podcasts on Spotify is easy. Just open the app, tap Browse, and dive into their growing library. Subscribe to your favorites, including our entire archive, so you'll never miss a show. You can also download podcasts for those moments when you're up in the air or going underground. Podcasts on Spotify are streaming right now. Go check them out today.
Blue Moon is brewed with Valencia orange peel and a touch of coriander. It's a creative twist on a Belgian-style wheat ale for a taste that shines brighter. Taste responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Cian Fahey from Pre-Snap Reads joins us. I had the great pleasure of meeting Cian at the aforementioned talent meeting. Before we get to any football, Cian, just tell me a little bit about what your thoughts were on meeting all the gang and coming to Bristol.
Well, first I'm disgusted at Dominic Foxworth because I was one of those people standing in that queue and I didn't realise that and I can't explain how cold that was. I could just feel my bones. I couldn't feel any skin. It was awful. I met Clinton. This poll is very unfair to you, by the way, that you're losing right now.
That's fine. I am not an approachable human being.
I think you're lying, though. The key detail here is a lot of people, Amin Elhassan, a lot of people at ESPN expected me to be able to, like, dap them up and stuff, and Clinton just walked up straight away and just like, normal handshake, yeah, thanks, I didn't have to feel awkward and feel like a fool, it was great. So that was my big takeaway.
What was it like, though, meeting all those people? I mean, I don't know how often you get to the States, I don't know how often you get to mingle with, various people that you work with, but just as an overall experience, though, what'd you think of it?
Man, it was surreal. Like, we were sat in, like, little bleachers at the back of the actual setup, and you kind of look to your right, and there's, like, an NBA player. You look to your left, and there's, like, an NFL host, or then you look in front of you, like, Rachel Nichols is 3 rows in front of you. It was a bizarre, like, as someone who's kind of a fake employee of the company right now, it was bizarre for me to be there. But, yeah, it was mostly really cool. It was just, next time do it in Miami or something like that where it's warm.
Good point. Cian Fahey of Pre-Snap Reads joins us here on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. Clinton Yates filling in here. All right, let's get to some football. What am I supposed to think about Blake Bortles and, as a result, the Jacksonville Jaguars?
We do, like, such a low bar with Blake Bortles right now. Like, remember a month ago when he threw 2 interceptions in the final 2 minutes of a game that they won?
Yep.
like he has to do very, very little for them to win games, and now we're suddenly talking about Blake Bortles instead of kind of going, the defense is still dominant and the offense is set up for him to be like just this guy, kind of a passenger. And that's the way they set up their team from the very beginning. When Tom Coughlin took over, he didn't really try and replace Bortles. He didn't bring anyone in. Like, they had that Chad Henne competition just before the start of the season, but Henne was so bad that they went straight back to Bortles without it ever happening in the regular season. And they've got this setup now where Bortles can not lose them games, but when they go into a matchup with someone like Tom Brady, with someone like Ben Roethlisberger, although the last time they played Ben Roethlisberger, they intercepted him 5 times. But if you get Ben Roethlisberger on a good day, if you get Brady on a normal day, it's going to be very, very hard for them to keep pace, even with that defense, even with a viable running game, even with a couple of receivers who are coming up good right now. Actually, Keelan Clay might be his name. That receiver they have there right now, who's kind of emerged over the last month or so, he's really flashed a little bit. So this is the kind of thing that always frustrates me, because the whole roster around Bortles right now is really impressive and is what we should be talking about, but now we're talking about Bortles for being not awful rather than just being really good.
Switching gears to Philadelphia, they obviously had huge problems when Carson Wentz went down, but Nick Foles is not a guy who's never played in the league before. I mean, I'd say there's an outside argument that he was, I don't want to say the best backup in the league, but he was certainly a guy who had more starts than a lot of other quarterbacks who had played for that team. What do you think about him and how the Eagles are sort of handling that situation?
I feel like that's the definition of best backup in the league, just a guy we've seen before. None of us know anything about any of the other guys. No one, there's like LeVar Ball isn't building an NFL development league where we can go watch these guys play. Foles against, like, the Giants helped because the Giants have been terrible recently, but Foles, it was a funny game at the weekend because he came in and he started really well, and he made a play that was kind of the antithesis of what Nick Foles is, where he gets to the line, he slides the line left, he incorrectly slides the line left, so that there's a free blocker coming off his right, and he has an opportunity to throw the ball to Alshon Jeffrey short, quick, and get rid of it, and he holds the ball, he hesitates, but then he kind of makes a defender miss, he uses a little pump fake, he uses athleticism, I guess, and gets into the flat and throws the ball, a perfect deep ball downfield to Torrey Smith in tight coverage, and that draws a defensive pass interference penalty that sets up the first touchdown to Alshon Jeffrey, which was again another a good throw. But after that initial surge, he kind of reverted to what we expected. He was kind of relying on a high-quality offensive line. He was relying on Aguilar to make a couple of impressive plays. He was relying on defensive busts and screens and stuff like that. And the Eagles' offense is so good that they can do that. And I've heard people say, once Carson Wentz went down, that their season was over. And I'm not talking about fans, I'm talking about prominent people, actual analysts. And they were saying, you can't win without your quarterback. But when you go through like the best teams in the league right now, there isn't a team who has a great quarterback and a great roster. Like the Patriots have a great quarterback, but we all know at this point that roster isn't great. The Vikings are probably the best team in the NFC, and they're down to their third string quarterback. So it's not like we can say, hey, losing Wentz has ended their season. They're still very much the second, third, maybe fourth, but they're still in that top group of NFC teams who could go to the Super Bowl.
Cian Fahey joins us here on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. Clinton Yates filling in here on a Friday. Jared Goff, speaking of offenses that are pretty good, looks, I would go so far as to say, excellent. How much does that team rely on him? I know they don't do a lot. I mean, I know they try to make it simple for him, but can they continue to do that throughout the playoffs based on what you've seen?
Sure, and I think, again, we're kind of focusing on the quarterback a little bit too much, because the real turnaround there recently has been on defense, where Wade Phillips has got, so you've got in Los Angeles, I couldn't remember where the team was for a minute, St. Louis, Los Angeles, they were jumping around, but in Los Angeles you've got Aaron Donald, who is an absolute freak. You've got Alec Ogletree, who's been a celebrated linebacker who never really deserved to be celebrated, because he's a guy who makes a flashy play but then gets blocked out of 10 runs that go for 120 yards. And Wade Phillips has found a way to make that work a little bit. Now, it helps that the offense plus points a game, and it's kind of dictating the way the game is played. You can't just run the ball on them all day. But Wade Phillips has really turned that unit around, and this is what Wade Phillips has done over the course of his career. He comes in the first year, he gets great production out of great talent. Maybe it develops or it goes away after a couple of years, but for the moment he's been a key piece. And with Goff on the other side, your only real question mark so far has been that Minnesota Vikings game, where they contained him after the first drive. Besides that, nobody else has been able to contain that offense, because as we saw last week, Todd Gurley is a freak. The offensive line is phenomenally good. It's effective and consistent. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Sammy Watkins, and Gerald Everett. You've got such a list of stars, or not stars, but high-quality skill position players who complement each other perfectly. And everything is clicking there, and it's very hard to disrupt it. So the only real concern I have for them is what happens when they come up against that Eagles defense again and that Vikings defense again. Those teams should be able to match up to them and contain them a little bit. And when you can't win the game easily, is Goff going to be able to make the consistently tough throws, the plays in tight games where you're going to win it? And I'm just not really sold on that yet, because I haven't seen him do it.
I'm sticking with quarterbacks here. I loved that play with Cam Newton calling out what was going on with the Packers and then making that little underneath throw for the touchdown. How well do you think he's clicking? Because he looks great to me, and I'm of the opinion that when he's not just playing well but very, very confident, the Panthers are kind of unstoppable. He's such a weapon.
Yeah, Jacoby and I talked about this on the podcast this week on the Nickel Package, and it's like I don't think Cam is fully healthy even at this point of the year, because never before have I watched him go through a season where one week he's like the worst quarterback in the league and the next week he's the best quarterback in the league. And people have kind of always assumed that's the way he played because his numbers are like that. But that hasn't really been the story of him. That's been the story of the offenses he's been in. He's had inconsistent offenses around him, inconsistent supporting casts around him, and that's made his numbers look inconsistent. This year, it's kind of been more, he's been really inconsistent. Like, he's missed Christian McCaffrey a lot on open plays underneath that he would, in previous years, probably expect to hit, and you would expect him to hit them moving forward once he's kind of fully healthy again. I think that shoulder surgery mattered a lot. But the really interesting thing about the NFC right now is they're not considered one of the top teams, but you could very easily see a team with Cam Newton, Luke Kuechly, Christian McCaffrey, all these phenomenal stars. Like Thomas Davis is suspended right now, but he'll come back and be an excellent player as well. And then you kind of move down the list, and you've got the Falcons, you've got the Saints, you've got the Cowboys, who might not even make the playoffs. So it feels like the NFC is just so packed with so many high-powered teams. And then you look over at the AFC, and it's kind of the same thing we've had all along with Brady and a couple of teams you have a little bit of hope for. So I really like the Panthers. That play in particular is kind of I feel bad for Clay Matthews, to be honest, because I think Clay Matthews had it right. He's just a little bit unlucky. So Clay Matthews saw that they were on the narrow side of the field. McCaffrey was on the narrow side of the field, and he had two receivers tight to the formation. So he knows that the wheel route is coming. And the reason Cam is so calm and can just react to Matthews and just laugh at him basically is they've called the opposite of the wheel route, where it's going to perfectly exploit what Matthews has called out. And I feel really bad for him, but it was also an awesome moment just to see Cam laughing at him.
Last thing I'll ask you, the Kirk Cousins situation. I am banging my head against the microphone right now as I am a fan of the Washington football team. What do you make of this in terms of, just where he can go, what you think is going to happen based on what he's done this season?
I actually think he might have had his best season in the league, but again, like, what is that saying? I don't think it's saying a huge amount. Obviously, he's had big numbers in the past. I always feel like he's a guy who is going to take the 6 yards that are definite instead of taking the 20-yard throw or aggressive throw that actually help you win the game. See, this is a thing you kind of need to dive really deep into. We tend to, in the NFL, say if a guy doesn't throw interceptions, he makes good decisions. But I always find the situational awareness, the situational understanding of what your team needs at a specific time to try and win the game, I always find that to be a better determination of how good you are at making decisions. And I'm still very much concerned. That's my biggest concern with Cousins. I think he's a guy who will happily check down on third and long, who will happily check down even on second and intermediate or medium, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think that helps you win games. I don't think he elevates anyone around him. I don't think he sets you up for success, and especially not when you're going to have to pay him 25 or 30 million a year, whatever it is.
He's Cian Fahey. You can find him at presnapreads.com and also on the Nickel Package podcast, and he's a big fan of karaoke. Thank you, Cian.
Thanks, man.
Coming up, does Vince McMahon have a viable product in the XFL? Part 2, Clinton Yates. That's me, filling in here on a Friday. You guys are coming weak on the Twitter, per usual. That's how y'all roll, but that's not my problem. Vince McMahon sells $100 million worth of WWE shares to help fund sports-focused company. I'll read the lead from Darren Ravel. Vince McMahon's plan to perhaps try his hand again at a professional football league came more in the focus Thursday. McMahon is chairman and CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment, which filed details with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission about McMahon's sale of 3.34 million shares of WWE, equaling about $100 million. He did so, the filing noted, quote, primarily to fund a separate entity from the company, Alpha Entertainment LLC, which Mr. McMahon established to explore investment opportunities across the sports and entertainment landscapes, including professional football, end quote. Translation, the XFL is coming back, kiddos.
Hell yeah.
Mike Ryan is very excited.
So jacked.
Put it on the poll. Would you attend an XFL 2.0 game? Yes. No. Maybe so.
Guillermo and I are super excited because we both did the regional thing and supported the Orlando Rage because it was the closest XFL franchise to us. Although the Las Vegas Outlaws definitely had a leg up on the competition because that was the first game, and that first XFL broadcast was magic. And they had former University of Miami quarterback Ryan Clement as their starter, and He Hate Me happened, and The Rock was doing an intro, so I was all aboard.
That's Mike Ryan, executive producer of the XFL 30 for 30. That is a lot of XFL backstory knowledge, Mike. I had no idea you were that into it.
I love the XFL because I was a big WWE fan, and I was watching basically a hype video for the XFL every Monday on Monday Night Raw, and I wanted to support it. I thought it was going to revolutionize football as we knew it. I watched every week. I was so bummed when it went away. I was a huge XFL fan.
Huh. But it came from, okay, so let me just unpack this a little bit. What you're saying is that you were a wrestling fan, and as a entertainment product, you simply shifted over as a, adjacent sports product from wrestling. It wasn't necessarily about football as much as it was about you trusting the WWE product. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I like football too, so it was combining two of my favorite things at the time. Football year round sounds good to me. I recognized a lot of the names that were playing in that league. They had Rashaan Salam, they had Kirby Dardar, they had Ryan Clement, they had He Hate Me. They made stars. Tommy Maddox. Tommy Maddox had a run in the NFL after the XFL because of the XFL.
With the Steelers. That is a very good point. But I got to tell you, Mike, there is zero chance I think this can work, simply because of the times that we're in. The XFL was branded on this notion of it being an outlaw league where they didn't care about as much stuff from an injury standpoint. They were the kind of league that was having cameras follow ambulances to the hospital when dudes would get injured. You might recall that they had that set up to begin games where two dudes would run from 20 yards away and do this like capture the flag bit to try to see who was going to get possession. I'm fairly certain the first time it ever happened, the guy separated his shoulder and they never did it again.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Ran fast and loose with the concept of personal safety. And in the year of our Lord 2017, which is fastly ending, there's just no way that I think this is a viable product for anybody to watch outside of a sort of, I don't even know, like a meanest man type vibe of people who are going to see, people bare knuckle box in barns in Iowa. Like, this doesn't even remotely seem like something that the average sports fan in America will be able to digest if it is being marketed as more violent than the NFL already is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you're also making the assumption that that's going to be the marketing strategy. And by the way, it's a safe assumption just considering it seems as though it's an XFL reboot. I believe, given the current state of the NFL, there's absolutely a lane for someone to maybe potentially give them a run for their money. But the stuff that people don't like about the league would sort of fall within the XFL branding. The taking a knee, for example. The XFL sort of encouraged personalities, but people don't like that. So if you're trying to be an alternative to the NFL, are you going to make everybody stand? You're going to have to be extra violent, but how will that play in 2017, as you said? I don't really know how they go about doing it, but I do think that there's a space there for a legit competitor.
I don't know, man. The NFL takes up I hear you. That makes sense. But the NFL takes up so much airspace that I just don't see a world in which another football league, without actively sort of admitting that it is a lesser than product, which, I guess is the only way to go, is viable. Who's airing this? Like, who's going to play in that league? Look, the XFL worked in that time, I think, because we knew less.
But it didn't work.
Right. I'm saying it got off the ground because we sort of knew less about head injuries. I still think the violence element is, unfortunately, the only thing that's really going to sell, but that can't sell. You're not going to sell a smarter league than the NFL. You're not going to sell a more fun league than the NFL. I just don't think that's really real. They brought back celebrations. Those are dope. We've seen those week to week. I just don't understand what you can do at this point on a football field outside of simply playing games, which might be the only way that it really works, is that people are so pressed for football that they come out and watch.
I know what you can do, Clinton.
What do you do, Mike?
2 words. Tim Tebow.
Oh!
Let's not act like Tim Tebow quarterbacking an XFL game wouldn't be a ratings bonanza.
I'll go a step further. Tim Tebow, player coach.
I'm in.
Peanut butter Tebow time.
Against Johnny Manziel, player coach.
Peanut butter Tebow time versus Johnny Football. I would go to that. You might have just sold me on XFL 2.0. I'm in shock right now. I would watch a player coach. You know what? If the coaches were required to be players, then I would watch the league. And you know who I'd want one of those players and coaches to be? LeVar Ball. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in here on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio. Amin, I'm going to ask you first and foremost what you thought about that beautiful gathering of talent in Bristol last week.
Well, it was nice to see you all. And I'll leave it at that.
Short and to the point, but let's get to the NBA. I just read in the SportsCenter update this situation with KCP. Have you ever heard of anything like this in the NBA? Fam is going to jail on the side of playing basketball. How do the Lakers deal with that? It seems like a weird situation.
Well, that's funny because I knew the case. I was not aware until probably yesterday that he was actually at a facility. I just assumed he was under house arrest or something like that. So no, I don't, not in season. I don't remember anyone having to go with anything like this in season. I did joke, however, when the story broke, that Phil Jackson was saying somewhere, that's all I had to do to ensure that I stay home. If you remember a couple of years ago, he wanted to coach the Lakers, but he only wanted to do home games. That would have been a good option for him. He should have just gotten a DUI and then, been on house arrest or something.
Sticking in the Western Conference, the Rockets are an incredible basketball team right now. They're incredibly fun to watch. I love what D'Antonio's doing with that squad, between the way CP and Harden are really getting it done. Is this the best we've seen Harden so far in his career, or do you think that this is really just sort of a function of how well that team is put together in the man management?
Oh, I think it's all of it, right? He's obviously entering his prime as a player, so it's stands to reason that he's improving year by year, especially since now this is year 2 of playing for Mike D'Antoni, whose playbook has opened up the game for Harden, made him a more effective player, I think, by forcing him to be a quicker decision maker. I thought, he had good assist numbers under McHale and, in the previous regime, but the difference was he was a ball stopper. He catch and hold, and the assist was more often just a last resort to whatever the defense shows. Now he's a lot more aggressive, and I think the playmaking is coming in the flow of him playing, as opposed to just kind of something to do at the end of the checklist. But at the same time, I'd be remiss if we didn't look at the influence of Chris Paul, one of the renowned great leaders in this league. And one of the things we always talk about James Harden is his leadership probably needs some work. So that influence there obviously helps. And then, Daryl Morey has done a good job of surrounding this team, not only with shooters, but subsidizing him with defensive players. Luke Richard-Mbamute, P.J. Tucker, obviously the drafting of Clint Capella a few years ago. The Rockets aren't just, and Harden isn't just better because he's gotten better or because they're an offensive force. He's better and they're better because defense has become more of a priority, and it's easier for him to be competent defensively if he's surrounded by competent defenders.
Amin Elhassan, ESPN NBA insider, joins us here. Switching over to the Eastern Conference, the Bulls are bonding. What am I supposed to make of that situation after how bad the circumstance was earlier in the season?
Clinton, the weirdest thing about it is they still haven't talked to each other. So the best Bulls lineups all have Nico Mirotic and Bobby Portis on the floor at the same time. I'm talking about, if you look at all the lineups where they've been on the floor, and I know a small sample size theater, they're all positive. And not just positive like, a +3 net rating. I'm talking about +17, +42. The net ratings are off the charts. And it's not like this team is beating scrubs. It's not like, it's okay, so you got some cheap wins against the Suns or the Clippers. They're getting wins against quality teams that we expect to be in the playoffs. They beat the Celtics. They beat the Bucks. They beat the Jazz, right? They're beating good teams in this streak. I don't know. I really don't know. I've never seen anything like this because here's a weird thing, Clinton. Even before Mirotic had his face rearranged by Bobby Portis, we went into this season thinking that's the worst team in basketball right there. That's the worst collection of talent, right? So it's not like, of course they're playing better because he's back now. No, we thought they were going to be garbage even before he was gone. So for them to be on this kind of streak, with basically the same group of talent that they started the year with, is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
All right, let's move further up the standings in the Eastern Conference and IT and the Cavs. What's the status of his return, and how do you think that blend is going to go as far as whenever it is that he gets back into that lineup, or gets into that lineup, I guess, to begin with?
Everyone's kind of speculating that the Celtics game is going to be his game back. It's his first week of January. Dave McMenamin reported that's when they were targeting, the first week of January, and then everyone looked at the calendar and said, they're playing the Celtics. Makes sense. As far as how it's going to work, it's interesting, but, this guy's an elite scorer. And in many ways, I actually think that this is going to be a great situation for him. Conventional wisdom says, he had the ball in his hands last year all the time, and now he's got to go. He doesn't have the ball in his hands. LeBron's basically the de facto ball-dominating player there. How's that going to work out? But I think if you tell Isaiah Thomas, hey, man, you don't have to worry about making other people better anymore, at least not on a full-time basis. There's someone else who's going to set the table. All you got to do is go out there and get buckets. He's never played with a playmaker like this in his life. So I think it's actually going to make his game grow because he's going to be able to focus his full fury into scoring.
The New York Knickerbockers are at the 8th seed right now, and a guy named Michael Beasley has suddenly resurfaced in the NBA. This story is amazing to me, how he manages to pop up every other year and be somewhat of an impact player. What am I supposed to think about Beasley and yet another resurgence?
First of all, we have to acknowledge that in the calendar year 2017, nobody has had a better answer to a post-game scum question than Michael Beasley, because he was asked when he knew he had a hot hand last night, and his response was January 1989, which is when he was born. He's like, I've had the hot hand basically since day one of my life. Again, I'm a big believer in putting guys in positions where you are reducing the level of decision-making to be commensurate with their ability to process that, right? So LeBron James, genius basketball player, I give him infinite options because I know he can handle it. Michael Beasley, not so genius basketball player. Just reduce it down. Hey, man, just go out there and get buckets. Don't worry about all the other stuff. Just get buckets. Once you can reduce his workload to minimizing, hey, should I have made that pass over there? Am I supposed to make that guy better or not? Wait, what am I doing defensively? Don't worry your pretty little head about any of those things, Mike. Just go out there and get buckets. And that's when he flourishes, and that's when, the game becomes easy for him because you are reducing the stress of decision-making from him.
All right, last thing I'm going to ask you. And we got to do this delicately because there are people who claim to care about Star Wars who have yet to see the film. I don't understand this. We're a week out, fam. Y'all got to go see this movie if you act like you're supposed to care. Okay? Let me ask you this. Who do you think, without spoiling anything, was the best overall character in Episode 8?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I've seen it twice already, and I'm mad that I didn't go watch it again last night. So I'm just saying, for all the people who haven't seen it at all, you're right. We're more than a week out, man. You should have seen it 3 times by now. But anyways, the best, it's got to be Kylo Ren. It's got to be Kylo Ren, right? That's the biggest amount of character development of anybody in the movie, in terms of being a very nuanced, by the way, character. I don't think it's straightforward. The idea that he's the bad guy, that's kind of how a lot of movies and a lot of stories are told in mainstream. Is just kind of like, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy, bad guy, fight, boom, good guys win. It's easy to process, and it's a lot harder to process nuanced depictions of characters, right? Where it's like, yeah, you're a bad guy, but I kind of feel like, why? Okay, maybe you're not that a bad guy. Oh, wait, no, you are. Wait, are you? Because that's real life, right? We rarely walk up and see pure evil. There are people you don't get along with, but I'm sure you can understand motivations in them that are less than nefarious that just don't coincide with yours. So, Kylo Ren, yeah, definitely. What was your answer?
Rose. I love that character.
Really?
I wanted much more of her. I wanted more of the backstory with her sister. I needed a whole other half hour of her deal, quite frankly.
That's what I felt. Her and Finn, that was the part of the story that had to, it's the longest Star Wars movie ever. Let's start there. It's the longest in running time Star Wars movie ever. So when you make a movie that long, and obviously you're focusing a lot of the character development on Rey, on Kylo, on Luke Skywalker, it leaves not a lot of time on the cutting room floor to devote to fleshing out Finn and Rose. I, too, wanted more from them, but I realized also we can't have a 4-hour movie either. So they kind of got shorted in that exchange.
He's Amin Elhassan. He's an ESPN NBA insider and a big Star Wars fan, almost bigger than me. Thanks, Amin.
Thanks a lot, Tim.
You know how I know that I'm a Star Wars snob, y'all? Because I don't call him Kylo Ren. I call him Ben Solo. Clinton Yates in for the Dan Lebitard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio. Clinton Yates filling in here on the Dan Lebitard Show with Stugotz on a Friday. Speaking of football, people are talking about the Carolina Panthers. They got let's just say a rather problematic guy who owns the team. I'm not even going to get into how he was running that operation and how grotesque it was. But very shortly, I will say, if you've got a dude forcing people to call him Mr. around the facility, yeah, that's creepy on an antebellum level, and nobody is here for that. Never mind his disgusting attitude towards women. The way my man was running that ship was gross. I say that as a black person in America. That aside, he's selling the team because the NFL was basically like, look, we're going to let you walk and sell these guys, but you got to go right now. He's getting out well, if you ask me, about Jerry Richardson's overall sort of condition leaving this scenario, considering what he apparently has done. That said, who should buy the Panthers? Mike Ryan Diddy's name has been floated out there in conjunction with Steph Curry, sort of. That's an interesting bid. People have talked about Peyton Manning. Mark Cuban's name has come up. Eddie DeBartolo is probably the most realistic chance, considering he already owns an NFL team and he's got boatloads of money. Mike Ryan, who do you like best to buy the Panthers?
Well, I'd like to see the Carolina Panthers stay in Charlotte, and the new owner, whoever they are, they'll have the option to move them in 2019. So if my preference is to keep the Carolina Panthers in Charlotte, then I'm going to want somebody who's tied to the community. I'm also going to want a brash personality because I'm tired of boring owners. I want this to feel more like professional wrestling. So, professional wrestling, Charlotte, Nature Boy Ric Flair.
Woo! Walked to the batter's box, swung at the first pitch, hit it out of the yard, placed the bat down without the flip. I like that, Mike Ryan. I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks diversity matters in this situation. There's a part of me that doesn't really care about Charlotte as a market, to be quite frank. But I think Eddie DeBartolo is going to end up being the guy who does it. Because at the end of the day, the NFL is still sort of the same old boys club it's always been. Hence the reason why guys like Jerry Richardson were even let into the league to begin with. You want to learn something about a business in America, look up that guy and how he made his money and what happened with the companies before he ever even got into the league. Diddy would be great. Having a guy who knows entertainment come to this operation would be grand for them looking forward. I just don't think it's going to happen. The NFL is not that progressive. Alas. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in for Dan Le Batard and Stugotz on ESPN Radio.